In the high-speed world of IndyCar racing, Dan Wheldon was a force to be reckoned with, a champion on the track and a beloved figure in the sport. He lived life in the fast lane, but in a heart-stopping turn of events, his final race would become a terrifying nightmare. Amidst the thundering roar of engines, the exhilaration of the race, the thrill of victory was just inches away. Yet on that fateful day, the track transformed into a battleground of chaos and danger. Join us as we unravel the tragic story of Dan Wheldon, a tale of speed, triumph, and the haunting echoes of a race that would change everything. Dan Wheldon was born on June 22, 1978 in Emberton, England. His passion for racing was ignited at an early age, a trait he gained from his father, a former kart racer, with Dan's mother often keeping time during his races. At an age when most kids were just learning to tie their shoelaces, young Dan was already steering his way along the racing path carved out by his father. Dan began go-kart racing at the age of 4, but had to wait until he was 8 to participate in competitive racing due to age restrictions. During this waiting period, he gained valuable experience and honed his skills. He started with a self-built 60cc kart and later progressed to a more powerful 100cc kart. The hands-on experience of working on karts, coupled with his father's knowledge and passion for the sport, paved the way for his quick ascent through the youth divisions of motor racing. In the initial stages of his career, Dan made a name for himself in open-wheel racing, winning the RAC British Cadet Karting Championship 3 times consecutively in the years 1988, 1989, and 1990. And that was not it. In 1995, he transitioned to the international stage in Formula A, where he secured a podium finish and 3 notable victories in the European and World Cup. His achievements throughout the season culminated in an impressive 4th-place finish in the overall classification of the European Tour, solidifying his status as a rising star in motorsport. In 1996, Dan had the opportunity to switch over to automobiles. However, the financial demands of advancing his racing career in the UK proved to be more than his family could afford, which led him to relocate to the US in 1999. This move marked a new chapter in his career, unlocking new opportunities for him to refine his abilities in the lower levels of open-wheel racing. In the US, he competed in series like the USF 2000 National Championship, the Toyota Atlantic Championship, and Indy Lights. Inspired by his idol, Nigel Mansell, a British driver who won both the Formula One World Championship and the IndyCar World Series, Dan set his sights on a similar path of success. And by 2002, his ambition and drive paid off, catapulting Dan into the competitive arena of the IRL IndyCar Series. He qualified 5th for his first Indianapolis 500 in 2003, but unfortunately, he struck a concrete retaining wall late in the race and somersaulted into the air before landing upside down, which relegated him to finishing 19th. However, his breakthrough in 2004, winning the Indy Japan 300, set the stage for an exceptional 2005 season. That year, he achieved a remarkable feat by winning the prestigious Indy 500 and securing the IndyCar Series championship. While Dan Wheldon's racing career was marked by significant triumphs, he was also a dedicated family man. In 2008, he married Susie Bem, who was a racing publicist for one of Dan's sponsors and his personal assistant for several years before their marriage. And the following year, they celebrated the birth of their first son, Sebastian. And March 2011 saw the arrival of their second son, Oliver. Just 2 months later, the family posed at the finish line at Indy. Dan Wheldon, with a beaming smile, holds his son Sebastian, and Susie tenderly cradles baby Oliver. Together, they stand in front of the iconic Borg-Warner Trophy, a symbol of Dan's triumph in this Indy 500 edition, becoming the first driver to win the race having led only a single lap. But unbeknownst to everyone, this would be his last major victory. On October 16, 2011, IndyCar Series CEO Randy Bernard set up a challenge for the season-ending 2011 IndyCar World Championship at Las Vegas Motor Speedway, which was scheduled for 200 laps around the facility's 1.5-mile oval track. A prize of $5 million would be awarded to any driver to win while starting from the back of the field. Because the CEO was unable to get an international racing driver, he revised the challenge and offered Dan a chance to partake in it. He accepted and suggested to split the $5 million with a fan selected in a random drawing. The race was to be the final moment for a troubled 15-year period for IndyCar and the beginning of a bright new future. As preparations were underway for the season finale, Dan got a crazy, impulsive idea. His wife, Susie, shared, "We were at a sponsor dinner at the Palms, and on a whim, we walked into this tattoo place and got each other's initials tattooed on our wrists." Susie remembers, "It definitely wasn't Dan's thing, but I just went with it." Dan's fresh ink read SW on his wrist, and Susie had DW inked in the same spot. Of course, they had no idea what would happen the next day, so it was supposed to simply be a sweet moment shared by a married couple who were very much in love and hoping to make their family even bigger.
To be honest, why drivers don't like talking about the danger of their sport is it tempts fate. Do I believe that it'll ever happen to me? No. Could it happen to me? Absolutely. But at the end of the day, if your time's up, your time's up.
During the warm-up laps of the race, Dan Wheldon served as an in-race reporter for ABC. In a brief interview, he confidently expressed his commitment to winning. "I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't think that I could win," he said from his car. "Certainly, I am not underestimating the talent of the other drivers in the field. I think IndyCar has got a phenomenal field right now."
I've been excited by this event just with the build-up, but I can't wait for the race. I think there's pressure all the time, especially when you want to win as bad as I do.
The race at Las Vegas Motor Speedway kicked off as planned, with the initial 10 laps unfolding in typical pack racing fashion. By the end of the 10th lap, the 34 participating cars were all on the lead lap, spanning roughly 1/5 of the track, a gap of about 4.2 seconds from 1st to 34th place. However, on the 11th lap, the race took a dramatic turn with a significant multi-car collision involving 15 cars in turns 1 and 2. The incident started when Dan's teammate, Wade Cunningham, made contact with another driver, James Hinchcliffe, triggering a series of collisions. Wade further crashed into another car, who then collected 2 more cars in the impact, setting off a chain reaction typical in racing. This initial collision led to a pileup, causing subsequent chaos on the track. Another race car driver, Vitor Meira, lost control in an attempt to avoid the wreckage, and 2 more cars ended up crashing into his car. In the midst of this complex and rapidly evolving situation, Dan was desperately trying to slow down to avoid the pileup ahead. Dan, who started from the rear of the 34-car field, was running 24th on lap 11 when the accident occurred. During the race, Dan's number 77 car reached a top speed of 224 miles per hour. In an effort to avoid the escalating crash, he stayed low on the track, but his path was blocked by a cluster of cars. Despite reducing speed and applying the brakes 2.4 seconds before impact, Dan's car still hit the rear of Charlie Kimball's number 83 car at 165 miles per hour. The collision's force was immense, causing Dan's car to become airborne. As it did, the car struck a catch fence cockpit first, leaving Dan's head exposed to a pole from the fence. His car, inverted and parallel to the fence, hit the post with such force that it severely deformed the chassis and sheared off the roll hoop. The impact caused extensive damage to the cockpit, directly impacting Dan's helmet. Within seconds, several cars burst into flames, and debris were scattered across a significant portion of the track. Spectators watched in shock as the chaotic scene unfolded. As the dust settled and the damaged cars gradually came to a halt, their drivers assessed the situation, most of them unharmed. All but one, Dan Wheldon. Everyone was just waiting for him to get up and walk away from the site. But as time passed, Dan had not gotten out of his car, and it was clear that something was seriously wrong. "I'll tell you, I've never seen anything like it," racing driver Ryan Briscoe said. "The debris we all had to drive through the lap later, it looked like a war scene from Terminator or something. I mean, there were just pieces of metal and car on fire in the middle of the track with no car attached to it, and just debris everywhere. There was so much chaos on the track, it was hard to tell who was driving what car." In the meantime, doctors and paramedics clustered around Dan's car, and he was airlifted from the Las Vegas track at 1:19 p.m. local time and rushed to the University Medical Center of Southern Nevada. Sadly, Dan was declared dead upon arrival 30 minutes later. He died at the age of 33. When drivers returned to the track for the tribute laps, Dan Wheldon's number 77 was the only number displayed on the large scoreboard. An emotional Dario Franchitti, who led the championship before the final round, was seen sobbing uncontrollably as he got back into his car for the memorial ride. The atmosphere was filled with emotional songs like Danny Boy and Amazing Grace, resonating around the track. In a show of respect, hundreds of crew members from each team stood in honor of Dan, making a somber and heartfelt tribute to the beloved driver. On Monday, October 17, 2011, the Clark County coroner released the autopsy report stating that Dan had suffered 2 head injuries when his car was airborne. One would have been survivable, but the fatal blow was caused by a fencing pole that intruded into the car's cockpit. The death was ruled an accident, and Dan died of a blunt trauma to his head. In the aftermath of the 15-car crash, many criticized IndyCar CEO Randy Bernard and the organization for setting up potentially dangerous conditions. This included offering a jobless Dan Wheldon a chance to win a $5 million bonus by moving from last to first on a high-banked oval with enough room to race 3 wide at over 220 miles per hour. Concerns were raised about the suitability of IndyCar's design for pack racing on ovals. With its open wheels and cockpit, Indy cars are more vulnerable compared to NASCAR vehicles. In NASCAR, cars often make contact without major consequences, but in IndyCar, even minor contact can lead to crashes or a cascade of broken parts, highlighting the increased risk factor in these high-speed races. And even the drivers predicted as early as preseason testing that Las Vegas would be risky and repeated those warnings during the build-up to the race. "We can't race in a pack. You just can't in open wheelers. There's no room for error." Dan Wheldon's untimely death profoundly impacted his family, friends, colleagues, and the entire racing community. His wife Susie and their young sons Sebastian and Oliver faced the immense challenge of moving forward without him. However, in the years following, it was obvious that the apple didn't fall too far from the tree. Dario Franchitti shared, "They're clearly their father's sons. It's very bittersweet in a sense. It's a nice thing to remember Dan, but also reminds you of the loss of him." Nearly 10 years after Dan's tragic demise, his sons are following in their father's footsteps. Susie shared that when Sebastian, then Oliver, turned to driving, and then both became more serious about it, she missed it too. The boys started racing go-karts at a track near their home in St. Petersburg, Florida, before they were even old enough to go to school. And in 2022, the brothers raced each other in go-karts on the road course at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, hoping someday to match their father's accomplishments in the Indy 500. It felt good, especially seeing how Dad was able to win this race, and hopefully I can do it one day as well, Sebastian said. Susie shares, "Dan would have been over the moon about our son's racing. He would be so proud." As we reflect on the legacy of Dan Wheldon, we remember not only a remarkable racer whose skill and daring left an indelible mark on the IndyCar series, but also a devoted family man whose warmth and smile were as memorable as his victories on the track. If you found this video informative or thought-provoking, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel to stay updated on more tragic stories.